You're watching Twin Tiers Sunday with Renata Stiehl.
Hello and welcome to Twin Tiers Sunday. I'm Renata Stiehl with WENY HD News, and this week we're talking about an important agency here in our community, the Sexual Assault Resource Center, which you may know formerly as the Rape Crisis of the Southern Tier. I'm joined here by Sarah Blagg, who's the Community Affairs Coordinator for SARC or SARC, or how do you pronounce, what's the acronym there?
We do call it SARC, yes.
SARC, okay. And again, Sexual Assault Resource Center, really providing a vital resource to people in our community, not just women, men as well, because we know that women are not solely victims of sexual assault in our community. We're going to talk more about some statistics in the show, but first we want to talk about, you know, one of the reasons you're here is just to talk about the Sexual Assault Resource Center, it's a new name from Rape Crisis, and kind of going through a rebranding process.
Yes. We started in 1996 as Rape Crisis of the Southern Tier, and a year or so ago we sort of decided that the title didn't quite fully encompass everything that we do, so we opted to start calling ourselves the Sexual Assault Resource Center, SARC as we say. The new logo, if you see it, is a sort of winding heart shape, and we feel that it represents sort of the path that survivors of sexual assault take on their way to healing.
And now let's just talk about some of your programs and services. But first, let's find out, like, what is the service area for you here in the Southern Tier? What is your reach?
We cover Chemung, Schuyler, and Steuben County. We do have a primary counselor in every county, so there's somebody who's available locally to people if they need to meet one-on-one. But we have a 24-hour hotline through which people can get phone counseling 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And through it, we also provide medical and legal accompaniments. So if somebody calls from the hospital, or if a nurse calls from a hospital on their behalf, somebody is on call all the time to meet them at the hospital and advocate for them and stay with them through the process of what happens when you've been through a sexual assault if you choose to go forward with getting an exam done.
And now let's talk about that process. Whether you are a victim of sexual assault in a random attack, whether it's from somebody you know, a family member, a loved one, and you seek out help. What happens from the point that you or, say, a nurse at the hospital calls the hotline? What's the steps that person will go through?
Well, what happens is one of our staff members or volunteer counselors, and we're all completely fully trained by the New York State Department of Health, somebody comes to pretty much just advocate and ensure that the person gets to make their own decisions. There is a forensic exam kit that can be done, also known as a rape kit. They can opt to have that done or not. They may just want to get checked to see if they received an STD or take a pregnancy test if they're a woman. And we just stay with them and help them through that and try to explain things to them maybe on terms that aren't so medical. And it can be a few hours if they choose to have a kit done. It completely depends on the situation.
And now I imagine that some people may be hesitant to come forward because either the shame associated with being a victim of sexual assault, whether it's made to feel like it was your fault, or they just don't want anyone to know what happened to them.
Part of what we do, as well as provide all of these services for free, is that they're completely confidential. And even when you're in the hospital, you don't have to provide the name of your perpetrator if you know who it is. And just because you get an exam done doesn't mean that you have to report it to the police either. You do have 30 days to make a decision about whether or not you'd like to take that a step further and report it to the police. And the hospital will hold whatever evidence they have throughout that time.
And you mentioned that you do have counselors on staff that can kind of walk you through the process. If you're not sure if you want to go to the police or what those steps are, they can help. They won't push you in any one direction, but they will guide you and let you know what all those options are.
Yes, we are always encouraging people to make their own decisions. We present them with all of their options and we let them take the next steps. We do encourage people to seek counseling if they think it's the right step for them. Everybody processes things in different ways, so Some people might prefer a support group, which our counselors can work to arrange for them. Some people would prefer the one-on-one counseling that we do offer.
Okay, and now you mentioned that you do have a 24-hour hotline, and what is that number?
888-810-0093 is the hotline that can be reached at any point during the week, during the day, in the middle of the night, at any time at all.
Okay, and you mentioned that you have trained people answering those phones. We're going to talk about your volunteers, because it really, how important are your volunteers to what you're able to accomplish?
Our volunteers are vital to the organization. There are only 6 of us on staff, and because we run a 24-hour hotline, that would mean that we'd all pretty much be working 24 hours a day. And something like sexual assault and pretty much any human service, it can be really heavy and difficult to carry with you. So this really gives staff a break where we don't have to necessarily be taking calls or going to the hospital all hours of the day. So our volunteers are essential.
And now for people who are watching and they're thinking to themselves, well, is this really even a problem in our area? I don't know anyone that's been assaulted, or, you know, that sort of thing doesn't happen. This area is, you know, nice, but that's not necessarily true. There's a lot of things that people, just because they're not seeing it doesn't mean that it's not happening.
That's absolutely true. Sexual violence also goes hand in hand with domestic violence, and that can be as subtle as intimidation or making vague threats about somebody's children or about possession of a weapon. And it does often morph into sexual violence as well. The national statistics are 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men will experience an assault at some point in their life. Locally, I can say that in 2012, at SARC, we received 853 hotline calls that entire year that were people calling from a hospital or calling from home saying that they had experienced sexual violence. We also had 667 one-on-one counseling sessions with people, and our counselors opened 125 new cases just in 2012. So you can imagine that not only is that a lot of work for us, but our volunteers are such a huge part of accomplishing all that.
And those hotline calls, that's, you know, several a day, and it makes you wonder, you know, how many people maybe aren't at that step where they feel comfortable making a call. Like, how many people are out there and they don't, like I said before, they just want to keep it to themselves. They don't want to draw any attention to what happened to them. Maybe they're not comfortable speaking with someone or going to the police. So really, the statistics are there, but you have to wonder what's not reported, and it's got to be such a bigger problem than we even realize.
Yes, they do estimate that about 50% of sexual assaults go unreported. So you can sort of do the odds yourself, do the numbers yourself, but we know that everybody heals at a different pace and everyone's comfortable with different things. So we encourage people to come forward. One of the really great benefits of the 24-hour hotline is that you don't have to give your name. You can call, and maybe you're worried about a friend or a family member, and you can pose it as a sort of hypothetical question, and staff and volunteers are trained on just to give information, and as well as doing short-term phone counseling and helpful relaxation hints and that sort of thing.
All right, well, we're going to continue talking about the Sexual Assault Resource Center. We're going to learn more about the volunteering aspect, whether you'd be interested in becoming a volunteer and what is involved in that. Also, you've got a big fundraiser coming up. We're going to learn more about that when we come back, so please stay with us. You're watching Twin Tiers Sunday.
Twin Tiers Sunday will return in a moment.
And welcome back to Twin Tiers Sunday. I'm Renata with WENY. I'm talking with Sarah Blagg, who's the Community Affairs Coordinator at the Sexual Assault Resource Center, which is formerly Rape Crisis of the Southern Tier. We were talking in the last segment about their services, their how you act as a advocate in some cases when necessary. You have a 24-hour hotline to really help in provide either victims of sexual assault or their loved ones with some support, some direction, just to know that there is help out there and to point you in that right direction if necessary. And now you talked, Sarah, in the last segment about how heavily you rely on your volunteers.
Yes.
And you are a very small staff, but you've got a 24-hour hotline to man, and we have a large geographical area that we serve as well. So talk a little bit more about the volunteers that you have and what kind of training do they go through?
Okay. The volunteer counselors go through a lot of the same training that we go through as staff. There's a 30-hour program that is mandated by the New York State Department of Health that trains certified rape crisis counselors. So we all go through that. It covers a lot of topics from child abuse to domestic violence to healthy sexuality to working with people who identify as LGBTQ. So it's very informative. We bring in a lot of guest speakers for it, people from other organizations that we work with often. I mean, we do have specific requirements for volunteers as well. We do ask that people are at least 18, that they have reliable transportation and access to a phone. They need to live in Chemung, Schuyler, or Steuben County. We do consider that our catchment area, and one of the services with the medical accompaniments is that we can get to somebody in pretty much an hour's time at the most. So that really helps us out, that people live locally and can be on call like that and respond pretty immediately.
And now what's some of the feedback that you hear from your volunteers that have gotten involved and maybe didn't know just how important this agency was to the community and the people that they serve?
We have a small pool of volunteers right now. They are such great people. They're so compassionate. And it's so comforting to know that we have people working with us who are interested in this and who take it seriously and who genuinely want to help people. We have a volunteer who's been working with us for almost 10 years. We have volunteers who just finished training in, I think it was May or June that we had our last round of training. And they range, we do see a lot of people who are already in human services or nursing or not necessarily the law force, like in the way of being a police officer, but maybe somebody who works in a law office. So it's really great. They're a varied group, and we're grateful for them.
And when that hotline rings, you would never know what's going to be on the other end.
You don't know. It could be somebody who's having trouble sleeping and they just kind of need some help with that, maybe because they're dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder. It could be a nurse from a hospital saying that they have a victim in there who would like an advocate. So you're just never sure what it could be. But we're always glad when people utilize it because we really do want to be there for someone.
And now, for people who are watching and they're thinking, you know, I really would like to help. Maybe my skill set would be a good fit. What is the process of becoming a volunteer at the Sexual Assault Resource Center?
What people would do is call the hotline number at 888-810-0093, and they ask to speak with me, the Community Affairs Coordinator, and I get back to them and I can email an application or we can chat over the phone for a little while. They can meet me in person. And we do have an interview process, so to speak, because we do want to ensure that people are going to be assertive enough to be an advocate. It can be difficult to approach people who we typically see as being those in charge, like doctors or nurses. I mean, those are people who are there to help us,
Right.
And advocates are as well. So, and we're lucky we have a close relationship with all the hospitals that we work with. They know who we are and they call us and they know that we're there to help everybody.
And now, do you do any sort of background vetting for the volunteers who apply?
We do a reference check, but we don't do an official background check.
And now, where are your locations? We mentioned real briefly that you've got a base in Chemung, Steuben, and Schuyler. But if people, can people walk in to apply, or how does that work?
They can. I am located at the Corning office, which is at 135 Walnut Street. And if people wanted to pop into the clinic and tell them at the front desk that they'd like to speak with me, I am usually there Monday through Friday, so I'm happy to come up and chat with someone.
And now you mentioned, well, we talked briefly at the beginning of the show that you have a really big fundraiser coming up, which is just one way that you, the Sexual Assault Resource Center does community outreach. So we want to talk about that in our next segment of Twin Tiers Sunday, so please stick around.
Twin Tiers Sunday will return in a moment.
And welcome back. We are continuing our conversation about the Sexual Assault Resource Center here in the Southern Tier. Whether you are the victim of sexual assault and you need to talk to someone, as Sarah mentioned, there's a 24-hour hotline. We're going to have that number throughout the show. Also, the need for volunteers and what the volunteers are able to provide people who need from your services, how to become a volunteer. We just spoke about that, but we also, you have a big fundraiser coming up. But you also do some community events, and that was another question I had. You do such wonderful work in the community and you help so many people, but how do people find out that the Sexual Assault Resource Center exists?
That's a good question. We do have a Facebook page. It's pretty new. We decided to wait until we were completely done with the rebranding to start that up. So we do have that. And we are working on a brand new website, so that is in progress as well. Otherwise, it's pretty much the hotline number itself. We are a program of Planned Parenthood of the Southern Finger Lakes, so people can also access our services and our contact information through that website. But we are at health fairs and wellness fairs, community services fairs, and we do have an educator on staff who goes into schools and talks with kids, I think as young as 9 years old, about bullying, sexual harassment, healthy relationships. When they get to be in middle school, I believe they do education about what's a healthy relationship versus an unhealthy relationship. And that's not necessarily dating, just as friendships, which goes along with bullying.
Now, I did a show some time ago about domestic violence, and I was really shocked to learn about the levels of domestic violence within high school relationships.
Yes. I think that right now, teenage girls, I want to say between the ages of 14 and 18 are one of the highest populations in which we see dating violence, which is similar to the domestic violence in the fact that it can be manipulation, it can be, you know, somebody texting hundreds of times a day. We do see a lot of that now. Unfortunately, that's sort of stalking almost.
Yeah. And now social media comes into play as well. And so it's good that that outreach is there in the schools to learn teach the kids how to recognize these signs. But you do have a big fundraiser coming up, and that's another question. Where does most of your funding come from? Because you rely so heavily on volunteers, and how does that all work?
We are funded partially by the New York State Department of Health, but also through the Office of Victim Services. So that's where most of our funding to keep the program going, to run the 24-hour hotline, that's where that comes from. But we do, aside from wellness fairs, we do try to throw fundraisers. We're a pretty small organization, so compared to some, even though we cover a large area, we don't have quite as many needs. But we do have to provide our victims with things like clothing sometimes. If somebody chooses to have a rape kit done, they're often asked to give up their clothes as well to be used as evidence. And we carry what we call comfort kits, which are just duffel bags with sweatpants and t-shirts and all different sizes. In case somebody chooses to provide their clothes as evidence, we have those as backup to give to them. And that sort of thing is not covered by any of the funding. So as well as the volunteer training, what it costs to train volunteers, it's not cheap for us, even though we don't charge our volunteers anything. So fundraisers are really helpful in making up for that.
Okay, and you have one coming up in the near future, so let's talk about that.
We do. We have on September 14th, we are having our first ever red carpet event. We're calling it the Red Carpet Soiree. And it's going to be from 7 to 10 in the evening at the Radisson Hotel in Corning. We are working with them so closely, and they're such great people to work with. And we're going to be using their Carter room, which is the really nice room that has the stained glass window in it. So we're looking forward to that. The event is, it's going to include live music from the Coluccio Family Band, which are some local musicians, and we will have a silent auction. And I can say that so far we have some really generous donations from local businesses, so we're really, really thankful to them as well. What else do we have? There will be hors d'oeuvres. There's going to be a great red carpet photo opportunity where people can sort of pretend they're on the red carpet, and we have a backdrop that'll be printed with all the businesses that are, that are loaning us their services or who are providing items for the auction. So that'll be like a proper red carpet backdrop, and it'll be a lot of fun.
Is it like a black tie affair, or is it?
It's more like a cocktail party or a semi-formal event. So we want people to have some fun with it, and I mean, if people want to come formally dressed, I highly suggest it, because I probably will be. But cocktail party is nice, a fun atmosphere, you know, just relaxing, but it's for such an important cause, and we want people to be aware of that as well.
And how much is the cost of admission or tickets, and how do people get those?
The tickets are $30 each, or you can get them at a discounted rate of $50 for a pair. And people can order them through eventbrite.com, or they can call the hotline and set it up with me.
Okay. And now, again, if people are joining our program halfway through and they want to learn more about the hotline, maybe they have a question about a loved one, or they've been a victim of sexual assault and really didn't know that the service was available, or that there is someone that they can just talk to or who can guide them and help them on their behalf. Again, what's that hotline number?
It's 888-810-0093.
Okay, and Sarah, I want to thank you so much for coming on the program, and thank you for joining us again. That is the Sexual Assault Resource Center, helping people here in the Southern Tier, whether you are the victim of sexual assault or you just have questions. The good thing to know is that you're really not alone. Again, that hotline is 24 hours and always someone available to talk to.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you again for joining us. This has been Twin Tier Sunday. We hope you have a wonderful day.